Hello, everybody. Reply to the chat if you can hear me. Hi, JB. All right, let's see. Tesla, markets are closed today. Tesla closed just below $200 per share. So, any questions, comments? Please reply in chat. Daniel asks, where's my FSD 12.2.1? Sounds like it went to special groups, but this is after 12.2. So this is the next build. So I'm guessing they must have fixed a few things, but they're going to need a couple of days to test with the special group, obviously. So let's go through the news. "25 minutes, we're going to start the X space. Natural gas prices are at all-time lows, which is really interesting to me. 1.55. Oil prices are at 78. Those markets are open today, obviously, just not the stock market or the bond market. This week, we have Netflix earnings, Rivian earnings, and Lucid earnings. Sorry, not Netflix, Nvidia earnings. Highly anticipated event. Lots of retail investors in Nvidia. I've been watching some videos and interviews on Nvidia over the weekend, and generally the tone is, yeah, it's kind of overvalued, but next year's orders and demand is secure. So I think some people recognize. So right now we have only on YouTube for the next 25 minutes or so. This is pre-game for the X space. X space is going to start in about 25 minutes. It seems to me that Nvidia investors believe, at least some of them think this stock might be fairly valued or overvalued, but the extreme growth, they say, justifies the high PE ratio. Nvidia is going to announce earnings, I believe, on Wednesday. And I read a tweet by the AI investor. Says, fun fact, Nvidia is projected to sell 2 million H100s in 2024, close to the number of cars Tesla would sell in the same year. Nvidia sells H100s for $30,000 to $40,000 with a gross profit of $21,000 to $28,000 each. Tesla sells cars for $46,000 but gross profit of $9,000 on each one. The crazy part about Nvidia gross margin, Nvidia doesn't even manufacture the chip. Another crazy part, there's no limit to the demand of H100s, while demand for cars is limited, says the AI investor. And this is basically a copycat of the post that he made in September 15 of last year. So I wonder, so the last part, he says there is no limit to the demand of H100s. it just seems like it can't possibly be true. So curious to see what other people think. Maybe I'll bring this up today a little bit. I really want to learn more about Nvidia. It's pretty amazing. So Elon said. So the AI investor also quotes Elon Musk, and the quote is, almost all data centers around the world will over time be powered by AI instead of conventional CPUs. This is why people believe the demand for Nvidia will be substantial for a very long time. This was what Elon Musk said in X Spaces in August 2023 when discussing FSD V12 and Tesla's use of Nvidia's H100s. This was a very important moment. Elon knowing more about technology than most significantly boosted my confidence in Nvidia. Despite investing years and billions of dollars into Dojo, Elon still wanted to buy as many Nvidia GPUs as Jensen could deliver. To me, this was the defining moment that ended any question about Nvidia's product leadership and the product future demand of Nvidia's GPUs for AI data centers. Tesla investors, especially Elon's fans, should find very little reason not to be bullish on Nvidia, says the AI investor. Interesting. Can says as soon as I buy a share of Nvidia, it will drop like a rock. Arto says Tesla have to start making own chips. Tesla does make its own chips, both on the training side and the inference side. They don't manufacture it, but neither does Nvidia. But Tesla designs Dojo on the training side and its FSD computer, trip chip, they call it, on the inference side. But doesn't sell it to others. So that's really interesting. In the reply, Tesla Auto says UBS posted they see delivery time of GPUs decreased, but they assume it's because of a better supply chain. We'll know Wednesday. Arthur says Germany and most of the EU is in recession. Yeah, hit the like button if you guys can, please. We have 18 people in the live chat. We're gonna start the X Spaces in about 20 minutes. This is the pregame. Welcome to the pregame. Any questions? Anything you think that we should talk about in the X Space? Please let me know in the live chat. I appreciate you guys being here and supporting the channel's watch hours. We have about 1,400 hours to go. Danielle says, thumbs up, people. Let's make Danielle the moderator. Good call, Daniel. Arthur says bad regression. I think Arthur means recession, not regression. Have you guys seen the 13 minutes when will Tesla have FSD, have no interventions video that I published on Saturday morning? If you have any, if you guys can please provide some feedback on the videos on the channel, I would appreciate it. I posted a poll today. How many Cybertrucks do you think will be produced in Q1? Let's post that poll in here too. How many Cybertrucks produced in Q1 is the question. Cybertruck is obviously a very important product for Tesla. After all the massive price cuts for the Model 3 and the Model Y and the Model S and the Model X, it's going to take Cybertruck reaching volume production of about 5,000 a week for Tesla to see significant free cash flow and profits from the product line. So I started the poll. How many Cybertrucks produced in Q1? It's going to be a couple $1,000s, but I'm curious what you think. 400 plus votes in the poll on X. Let's see if we can pass that in YouTube Live. Lance says, I think it would be interesting to discuss the FSD rollout in China and what would it look like compared to US. Thanks. From Troy Tesla's data, we know that FSD take rate in China is even lower than in US. It's like 1%. So even if Tesla rolls out V12 to China, it's probably not going to be 100%. It's probably going to be limited in some way or form, at first at least. That would be my guess. And the take rate is probably going to be slower. My understanding is that Chinese economy is weaker than in the US. So I think people are really, trying to cut down on spending, especially for big ticket items. Brett Tucker says, thanks for the spaces. Would love you to talk about the pending valley of death for OEMs, specifically how when tier 1, 2, 3 suppliers begin to see writing on the wall and begin to walk away from ICE. Yeah, Ford is apparently having difficulties again with UAW. Sean Fain is calling for a new Ford CEO apparently. And they could not reach a deal in their Kentucky plant, which produces, trucks. The UAW said Friday that roughly 9,000 workers at Ford Motors Kentucky truck plant would go on strike at 12:01 a.m. February 23. So that would be in 4 days, later this week, if the two parties are unable to reach a local contract agreement. So they reached a national agreement in October, and that was ratified. But I guess they also have to do local contracts as well. And apparently, the UAW can stop work at a plant due to health reasons, health issues, health concerns, health and safety. And apparently in the past, UAW has used that clause to negotiate other items other than health and safety. So later this week, the UAW is looking to strike Ford again, which is incredible to me. Eric says, I would love a breakdown. Actually, before that, Brett asked about specific suppliers, tier 1, 2, 3. Automotive sales, especially ICE hybrid sales, have persisted longer than I had expected. There was a lot of pent-up demand from the COVID years. So, production was low in 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023. So throughout 2023, that pent-up demand kept ICE sales buoyed. So We'll see if that turns in 2024. Some people are saying that, in recent months, that has abated a little bit, slowed down, and even turned down. So we'll see how that shapes up. But I don't think any tier 1, 2, 3 suppliers are worried about that right now. Eric says, I would love a breakdown of Ashok's 2023 presentation, specifically physics emulator and prompt to video output example, implications and opportunities. If Omar comes in today to the space, then we can ask him about that. Eric, you're also welcome to request to speak and ask a question directly to Omar or Meta. Daniel says, very curious how they're going to get FSD trained in China with data and AI restrictions. My understanding is that as long as the data stays in the country, in China, then it's fine to collect. As long as it's stored in data centers in China, then it's fine. And apparently it's not like you can't take anything out. You can take like a model out, but not the training data, as I understand it. But Meta would be the right person to ask that question. Arta says China hire FSD engineers. Okay. Lance says follow up on China FSD. Do you think because of the Chinese government, robotaxi may be easier to implement versus the rest of the world? I don't think so. I mean, Waymo already has operations in the US in certain cities, and they're expanding, they're increasing production. So it seems to me that they will figure it out. So, I think US will be the first place Tesla robotaxis start operating. Mile asks question. When are the superchargers going to be open for the other brands' EVs, and how is Tesla going to benefit from that? I think this is an immaterial subject because I don't think there's going to be many non-Tesla EVs on the roads. Right now, there are several 100,000 of them, but I think people are realizing they made a mistake and they're going to trade them in for a new Tesla. Those, several 100,000 non-Tesla EVs sold when Tesla's supply wasn't meeting demand. And that's not the case today. There's ample supply around the world of new Teslas, and the prices are the lowest they've ever been. In some cases, Tesla's prices are half of what legacy automakers' EV prices are. So, so I don't think you're going to see many non-Tesla EVs at Tesla superchargers in the future. Also, like, the primary reason why people buy non-Tesla EVs is because they don't like Elon. So if they don't like Elon, they're not going to go to supercharger to charge. And so I think it's going to be rare. We have a poll going on. How many Cybertrucks in Q1? 14 votes. 18 votes. 21 people in here. So if you haven't voted, please vote on the poll. And if you haven't liked the live stream, please go ahead and do that. We have 9 minutes to start the X space. It looks like the poll results here are a little higher than what I'm seeing on X poll results. Troy Tesla estimates Giga Mexico to be ready for production by the end of January 2026. So don't expect any production from Giga Mexico before 2026. And it's probably going to take a year, 2 years to ramp to full volume production. Sean Fain about Ford says maybe Ford doesn't need to move factories to find the cheapest labor on earth. Maybe it needs to recommit to American workers and find a CEO who's interested in the future of the country's auto industry. JV says he's subscribing to Patreon. Thank you, JV. Which new Tesla should I get? I'm able to get anyone. I mean, if money is not a problem, then yeah, I guess it depends on your needs. But, if you're single or just have one significant other, then, I would go with I would have gone with the Model S Plaid. But if you have a family, then I think Model X is the way to go if money is not a problem. Model X is just an incredible experience, I think. It really depends. I think every Tesla is best in different ways. If you want the best value for the buck right now, it's probably Model Y. If you want the latest technology, then get the Model 3. I'm 19, my dad said I can't get anyone. He says he will pay for it. Okay, great. We have 5 minutes to go to X Spaces. Any questions, anything we should talk about on X Spaces, please let me know. V12.2.1 is going out to Tesla employees and special groups according to Tesla Scope. Tesla Scope says this build of full self-driving beta is going out initially to 2023.44.30.20. Similar to the previous rollouts of V12, this build now includes Sport for Hardware 4 vehicles. Who's your favorite US president? I don't have I love them equally. Any questions, comments, please reply. True inflation for today for the last 12 months was 1.65%. Down substantially in the last couple of weeks. CME Group's Fed Watch tool shows very little chance of a rate cut in the next meeting, March 20th. And majority expectations are for a pause in May as well. So the first rate cut is expected to be in June. 25 basis points. And then for December, markets expect 4.5% interest rate. So that would be 3 or 4 cuts. So I think right now market expectation is in line with what the Fed expects. Do you think Tesla should buy more Bitcoin? I'd be shocked if that happened. Bitcoin is at $52,000 right now. We have Nvidia earnings on Wednesday. I'm curious to learn more about Nvidia. The stock is at all-time highs at $727 per share. $1.8 trillion market cap. PE ratio of close to 100. Curious to see what they're going to announce on Wednesday. End game is near. I feel with Elon saying Tesla won't be compute constrained at the end of the year. Well, aspirational goals. Do you think Bitcoin was an Elon idea or a Zach Kirkhorn idea? And is that the reason why he resigned, got fired? I have no idea. I've heard so many theories about why Zach left or got fired that it's kind of hard to keep track. There's like dozens of theories out there. Should I listen to this space on YouTube or X? Is there a difference or benefit to listen on X or YouTube? I know you can't request to speak on YouTube, so what is the best? Well, if you listen to, I mean, you don't have to listen to it on YouTube. You can listen to either one you want. Whatever better quality for you is fine. But most people have both of them open and YouTube on mute. The only reason I have this YouTube live is because it helps the watch hours, and I got to get to 4,000 watch hours. And right now we're at 2,600. But I like this poll function. I love the live chat. So right now we posted, for example, on the poll, how many Cybertrucks produced in Q1? We have 26 votes. And the results are actually different from what I see on X poll on X. So, all right, let's start the show. Let's start the space. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Happy Monday. Happy President's Day. Every speaker that comes up today is going to share their favorite president per Ranger the Dog's request. Omar, who's your favorite president?
I like Obama. He's pretty cool. Pretty chill guy. Not old as fuck. First president I voted for. Pretty reasonable guy. So, yeah, I know some people don't like him, but I thought he was good. Good.
Good. Wow, we have Machine off the bat starting today. What happened to you? Do you not have work today?
Yeah, I don't have work. It's President's Day.
Oh, okay. So you're so excited.
He got fired.
I got fired. Minor detail. And my kids are somehow out of the house right now. So until my wife comes back, and then She'll be like, "What the fuck are you doing? Talking on the internet?" But I just wanted to come say, I knew Omar would give some lame answer for best president. He's not a historian, doesn't probably ever studied U.S. history. Living in leftist San Francisco, they probably taught him more about, Russia or something. The best president is very clear. There's only one answer. It's Teddy Roosevelt, for sure. This guy was an icon. He was a badass. The teddy bear was invented after him. And this guy is like the stereotypical American. And there's so many stories about him. This guy's unbelievable. And you compare him to Obama. Oh, I like Obama. He's not the best president ever. Are you kidding me?
Who's the best president or who's your favorite president?
He should be your favorite and best. Okay, it's Teddy Roosevelt.
Okay. Happy Monday, man. You sound happy today.
I feel good.
Yeah. Is it because the kids are out of the house?
Partially. I had a good workout. I pooped. I'm about to eat some steak.
Is it an unusual event that you pooped well?
No, I mean, it's pretty regular. But the last few days, I feel like there was a little bit of constipation, so it was a relief. But I eat a lot of.
Can you imagine being one of those people who roll in a few minutes late to the space and the first thing they hear about is Machine's constipation?
I was thinking about that when I said it. We were on the same wavelength. So yeah, I do feel bad for those people. Trust me, people, we don't talk about these things much, okay? You just happen to walk in at the wrong time.
And then the other thing is, you can always just subscribe to a YouTube channel because you get the edited versions and I edit these grossities out.
Why don't you make a stealth version as well that actually just includes these things? I think that would also be great. I bet you would actually get more listeners to that.
Can you imagine?
They wouldn't actually have to care about Tesla. You could find people outside of your little Tesla bubble who just love to come listen to humor. And that's why they would just listen to me and Omar and not you.
That would be sick if that account got more subscribers. That would be so funny. What's your favorite news of the day?
Well, I don't know exactly today, but the last few days, further reinforced my, of course, accuracy versus you and Meta and your absurd timelines for FSD, as Musk basically admitted they don't have enough compute, which we knew.
Can I first of all, when are you going to stop pooping our predictions, because we've already switched out of them? It's been many months since we made a prediction that's been wrong on FSD timeline. Because we learned from you, your awesomeness. It finally rubbed off on us.
I don't think so. I think Meta still believed. He's very optimistic about timelines. Maybe he moved it back a little bit, but he was still unrealistically optimistic. Last we heard was Tesla had only, and I put it in quotes because of course it's still significant, but only doubled their compute capacity. And they had been talking about orders of magnitudes more, and doubling is just simply not going to cut it. Now, I don't know where they are right now versus when they had that statement, but based on Musk tweeting that they're basically don't have enough and it's going to come maybe at the end of the year, just means obviously the iterative speed for V12 may be bottlenecked by compute for at least another 6 months.
Do you prefer highness or awesomeness?
I mean, you can just call me Dr. Awesome.
Dr. Awesome. No, I'm not going to do that.
I think that covers most things.
Ranger the Dog says best president was Calvin Coolidge.
Oh, God. He wasn't Teapot Dome scandal, right? Was that Warren Harding? Coolidge is before Hoover. I don't remember what Coolidge did. Someone's got to remind me. He could tell me why. I don't know why you'd be good. The Roaring 20s.
Yeah. All right. Should we talk some serious stuff or should we just keep it light today?
I don't know. Whenever do I only speak seriously?
Well, at the top of your screens is a link to YouTube Live. I know people prefer X. I know it's not Elon's platform. I get it. On the other hand, I need to meet these 4,000 watch hours. So we have 1,300 or so hours left. Okay. And the more people that jump over there, at the top of your screens is the link, the quicker we'll get there. And then the quicker I can stop asking about it. So consider that. Chaitanya, go ahead.
Hey guys, good afternoon. So I just want to share a few of the observations and during my visit to the Toronto Auto Show this weekend on Saturday. Is it okay if I go over that stuff? Yeah, man?
Yeah. Go ahead.
All right. So I've been to the Auto Show Toronto on Saturday. So I've gone through each and every booth in the auto show as I'm more interested in EVs. And my most focus is around EVs. So the first observation I've seen is most of the automakers, they try to focus on EV as usual. And the second thing is the people attraction is around EVs. Most of the people are looking at EV cars a lot. I think there are a lot of videos already circling in X. As you guys already seen that, like the most of the people are around Tesla. So I spoke to a bunch of folks there. What's their thinking? What they're thinking about Cybertruck? The first thing is saying that it's a usual answer. They expected, to be smaller when they looked at the pictures, and it's much bigger than what they thought. That's the first thing. And the kids were going nuts looking at the Cybertruck. The kids like 6 years old, below 10 years old, looking at the Cybertruck. And like if you look at the people around around the Tesla booth, like almost like it's probably I would say 40% of the people are around this booth compared with any other booths. I would say like just out of like, let's say like you have like 100 people at Tesla booth, just like 10 or 5 people around the other booths. So that's how it is. After Tesla, I've seen that most of the people around Kia EVs, people are looking at the Kia EV9 and few other cars like that. The funniest thing is like the people are more looking at Kia rather than Hyundai. That's the funniest thing I have noticed. And the second thing is, another thing is, they were doing the demo drives as they're doing in US. They were doing the demo drives right there in the auto show, which is almost like I've seen like people have like everybody wants to do a demo drive. Like most of the people who wants to, who are looking into the sitting in the car and especially
All right.
Model 3.
That's 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I'm gonna start limiting people to 90 seconds. So what I need from you, Chaitanya, while I speak with machine, is 3 sentences that are most important. So take your time, select 3 sentences that are most important, and I will come back to you. Machine.
First of all, I appreciate how you worded that. I think I'm going to use that with my daughters because when they start going off the rails, I say, please summarize. But the way you just said it, I think is better. And I'm going to start saying to them, okay, please think about 3 sentences that you want to say, and I'll come back to you. So I'm going to try that. And number 2, I just want to say I get his point. That when people see the Cybertruck, they say, oh, it's much bigger than I thought. In fact, that's what Omar's mom said to me when we were naked.
If you need more parenting advice machine, let me know. Always available. I've read a lot of books. Omar, I see you pinned earlier a post by Marcus. Would you like to talk about it?
Yeah, well, first I disagree with Machine that Elon tweeted something, saying they don't have enough compute to solve FSD or anything like that. He said before that compute is the primary constraint as opposed to engineering talent now, which is definitely still true. But I think the tweet he was talking about was maybe about text to video generation in Sora. And he mentioned that they had, they have this text to video model that they use to generate training data, like synthetic training data that's like really, really realistic without having to go through the simulator. And they've been doing that for some time. And Ashok mentioned at CVPR that they can even put YouTube videos or other videos in there. And it's a, sort of general framework that works for that. But I think he said, we're not going to dedicate compute to training a model like that right now because we're focused on FSD Beta 12. But later in the year when, compute is less of a constraint, then we may work on, training a more generalized text to video model or something like that, similar to what we've done with the synthetic training data. So I don't think there's really, any new information there. They've said before that compute is a constraint. So I definitely didn't see anything that would cause me to change my timeline. Then the other interesting story this morning is people seem to be seeing a glitch in the release notes where FSD beta 12.2.1 is showing up as opposed to FSD 11.4.9 in the release notes. The software on their car appears to actually be 11.4.9 based on what it says in the software screen, but it looks like somehow the release notes say 12.2.1. So there were a lot of surprised people who took delivery and found out that their car had FSD beta 12.2 on it. And other people looking at the release notes now, they're all seeing 12.2. So that's kind of a crazy glitch. Originally, when I saw it, I was thinking, okay, wow, so they're actually probably taking this to wide release. If it's, pre-installed on cars, other people are seeing it. But unfortunately, it seems to just be some type of release note mix-up. But it could be hinting that they're about to do a release of 12.2. We did see the 12.2.1 branch go out to employees yesterday. So we could see it go out to other people, myself, other early access testers, possibly as early as today. So I'm hoping that we see that today or this week. And, there's a question really of how wide they take it. Do they send it just to the same group of 100 people? Do they send it to all the early access testers? Do they go wide? Elon did say on the earnings call that they were planning to send out FSD Beta 12 in the coming weeks, right? So it's kind of an interesting thing what's going on here. This release note mix-up is kind of strange. I don't think I've seen anything like it, especially not with a release as anticipated as this one. So that was, kind of a crazy thing to see this morning, but hopefully it hints that FSD Beta 12 really is going to go wider very soon.
Thank you, Omar. Chaitanya, what are your 3 most important sentences?
Yeah, the first one is, as I said, like I spoke to the multiple people, the first thing I noticed is they're lacking the EV education. That's the first one point. The second point is about the demo drive. It's really cool that they were doing the demo drive for everybody, whoever they're coming in, they were asking them to do a demo drive. And I noticed that everybody wants to go for Model 3 demo drive rather than Model Y. So I have to wait for half an hour to get my turn to try the Model 3 refresh. Model Y is ready anytime to drive. So that's the second point. And the third point I made is, the third point is overall, the people's mindset over EV is changing, but still lacking the education. As I spoke to like 50 to 100 people in there. Yeah, that's all.
All right, thank you, Chaitanya. Have you guys tried OpenAI's Sora?
It's not available yet. It's being red teamed right now.
So how many people have access to it?
As many people as have access to FSD Beta 12.
Interesting. And is that also true for Gemini 1.5?
I'm not sure.
Do you consider them to be in the same bucket of services?
Sora and LLMs?
Gemini 1.5 specifically.
Same family of services as what?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So Google doesn't have an answer to Sora at this time, is that right?
No, I don't think so.
Wow.
I don't know.
Yeah, OpenAI has Machine, are you following these releases? OpenAI, Sora, Gemini's 1.5?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the details of Gemini other than it's got a much longer token window. But Sora, for sure, obviously is a new, novel thing. There's no competitor as of now, and it's obviously impressive. And you just think about all the possibilities of what's going to change in the world with these models. I don't think it's really particularly useful for Tesla, but in terms of
What do you mean it is useful for Tesla? They've been using it for over a year for training data.
no, they use simulation, right? But I don't think they need Sora. So, I'm just
They
saying.
don't need Sora, but they use a text to video model to generate variations on their training data. They talked
Yep.
about this at CVPR. Also, I did a quick Google search, and I think Google does actually have a text to video model called Lumiere. So I pinned a post from January about that. But it looks like it's not as good.
Yeah, I mean, people are convinced that OpenAI Sora is going to revolutionize movie making. So whereas it took $100 million to make a blockbuster, more than $100 million, now an amateur filmmaker can produce something. I mean, even today, but especially in the next few months, in the next couple of years, amateur filmmakers will be able to make movies of that quality without all the production cost. Machine.
There's definitely going to be a huge field and a market to use this in. I don't think it's going to replace every artistic avenue, because do people at least my generation, care about the actual people? There's sometimes associative bonds with the actors and actresses, or musicians, for instance, and it's maybe hard to replace that. For instance, I've always loved the band Fleetwood Mac, and I just don't think a Sora generated video is going to allow me to understand these characters that slept with each other and snorted so much cocaine that they had to go into rehab. What Sora is not going to replicate that. I'm not going to have that bond with these people.
I mean, I think you look long term, yes. This is going to revolutionize filmmaking. A 5-year-old child will be able to type in a text box and generate a movie that is, motion picture quality from their bedroom in time. Now, kind of like FSD and autonomy, we're a ways off from that today. Like, this thing can generate 1 minute long videos without audio, and they're not perfect videos. Some of them are very strange. For example, someone had a glass breaking and its interpretation of a glass breaking, and the glass flies up into the air, and the liquid somehow gets onto the table. So it doesn't have this perfect modeling of physics. Someone had a giant, dog walking around the city, and when it stepped on people, they just disappeared, right? So we're very early on here, but it's clear that this is probably going to work just as well as an LLM can write a story today in time, and it's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger. It's something that kind of scales with compute. So one of the questions I have is, what does it cost to inference this thing, right? So, what's the inference cost of, say, a 1 minute video, and how many times do I need to do it to get it to look exactly, acceptable for my purposes? And I imagine it's probably a lot less than hiring a video graphics guy as a CGI guy, whatever. But, theoretically, it could be more expensive. I don't have a good handle on what the costs are. So it'd be interesting to get some information on that.
Any questions, comments, please request to speak. Looks like Machine's kids came back, so he had to drop off the space. I see his priorities. We have AJ here if he wants to come up and talk about Lucid or Rivian earnings that are coming up. And now we have Nvidia earnings coming up too. We can talk about that a little bit. Omar, what do you expect for Wednesday's Nvidia earnings?
Well, I think they'll continue to show strong growth, but they need to just really have exceptional numbers in every metric. Good growth isn't enough. It really needs to be explosive to sustain the market's expectations. So I think it'll be good, but it really better be good. It really better be phenomenal. So expectations are high.
Yeah, I agree. I actually built a model on Nvidia with some crazy assumptions to look at what are the implied multiples, etc. It was a couple of weeks ago, and it looks attainable because they have crazy high margins. But as Omar just said, they really price for exceptional numbers. So if they deliver short on that, or almost more importantly, if Jensen sounds cautious, that could create a reaction. I don't think it would be too crazy because there's so much, I don't want to call it hype, but let's call it so much enthusiasm about AI, etc. in the air right now that, I don't know, we might see negative 5, 6, 7, 8%, but then probably quickly people will then use the situation to buy a bit more Nvidia stock.
While we have AJ here, he's done a lot of work on BYD. I want to ask him about the stock buyback that BYD announced. Let me just read this news real quick, AJ, earlier, because I'm kind of curious about the details of this thing as well. So give me 1 second. At the top of your screens is the Bloomberg article. I'm just going to read this real quick. BYD is planning to repurchase more shares, the automaker said in a filing on Sunday, as it seeks to revive a stock price slump resulting in a 15-month low earlier this month. The Shenzhen-based company also said it aims to ramp up production of more luxury models this year, boosting its credentials beyond just stylish but budget-friendly cars. BYD's stock market performance has taken a hit as broader fears of a renewed industry price war spook investors. Shares in China more broadly have tumbled on wider concerns over the country's economic performance. Chinese EV makers Hong Kong-listed stock closed down 1.9% on Monday, bringing losses this year to around 13%. BYD on Monday upped the price pressure on rivals by unraveling a revamped version of its flagship Keen Plus plug-in hybrid sedan that starts at $11,000. BYD has said in the past it's determined to produce battery-powered EVs that are cheaper than fossil fuel-powered cars. After Keen Plus move, rival SAIC GM Whirling Automobile, a joint venture between GM, SAIC, and Whirling Motors, said it would also cut the price of their sedan by 6,000 yuan, which is about close to $1,000. BYD on Monday, the ongoing price war has already shown up in BYD's results. It guided toward a preliminary 2023 net income of between 29 billion yuan and 31 billion yuan, a short of analyst estimates of 31.5 billion. Record deliveries in the fourth quarter, when BYD overtook Tesla as the world's top seller of electric cars, didn't translate into another bumper profit. Fourth quarter net income will be between 7.2 billion yuan to 9.2 billion yuan, according to Bloomberg calculations, down from the previous quarter's 10.9 billion. So that's about a 20% drop. BYD previously conducted a 1.8 billion yuan A-share buyback in June 2022. BYD's A shares listed in Shenzhen closed 1.3% higher after Chinese stocks resumed trading following the Lunar New Year break. AJ, what do you think about BYD's stock buyback?
I think it's very, very aggressive because they are in a very tricky spot. You all guys know they have been growing explosively. That's probably the best word to describe it. But they really haven't generated a lot more profit, and that's why also the analysts were quite disappointed when they didn't really generate more net income from the significantly increased volume. Then also there's a concern that they're sort of running out of space in their large home market, and now for the basically first time ever, there's a significant focus on their overseas strategy or sales success. And I actually personally noticed a significant uptick in BYD advertisements in my country. And I spoke to other people in other countries, and they noticed the same. I'm talking about European countries. And you probably saw the headlines a few weeks ago. BYD is sending ships full with vehicles to Europe, and there was a lot of talk about kind of Chinese invasion of the German auto market. So far, but it's early days. In the countries that report daily or monthly, there's certainly more Chinese sales than a year ago, but it's not like they have like any meaningful market share as of now. But we have to see how this first 6 months will unravel, and how whether these Chinese vehicles can catch on beyond potential commercial buyers, because often what I've seen in my years in the auto industry, when there are new brands trying to sell vehicles in new markets, what they usually do as the first thing is they try to line up some, let's call it anchor buyers, like some large fleet owners, and they sell them several hundreds of vehicles at a huge discount, so that normal people actually see these vehicles on the roads. I expect a similar strategy in BYD for Europe. So there will be some sales, but how long they will last, and not just create some sales spikes, we have yet to see. Because NIO is a good example. NIO, for example, they started at the beginning of last year in selling the vehicles in Europe, and they did exactly the same thing. So we saw some months where they had some nice spikes, but then it quickly ebbed off, and it was just a one-off effect from these large vehicle sales, and it never recovered. And but NIO is a completely different category of vehicle compared to BYD. BYD, I think, is actually mostly competing with brands like the Volkswagen brand or the Seat brand or the lower cost Skoda brand, and and I don't see them as a competitor directly to Tesla, because I said in all the BYD vehicles, because BYD brought them in September to Munich to the larger auto show, and when I sat in these vehicles, I felt like, okay, they feel well built, and they delivered kind of the the standard of they have a more traditional feel to them, more ice feel. And I can see if I was a Skoda, like a no brand buyer, Skoda is not a really a meaningful brand. You buy it for the value. I can see why I might consider a BYD, because I'm apparently a customer who doesn't care about brand. So this is an acceptable vehicle. So I think these people need to worry about BYD. So the bigger picture, coming back to the bigger BYD group point, the reason why this buyback is so aggressive, because the international expansion is going to absorb a lot of capital. Because if the inventory they sell with all these ships to Europe, if it doesn't sell, it's a huge cash drain, and BYD doesn't have a huge cash reserve. Of course, they can always lever up and can improve their cash position, but again, I think this would be crazy. So I really struggle to see why they did this now. It's because the BYD, the other problem BYD has, it's a Chinese company. And when you look at the Chinese stock market overall over the last 15 years, it basically hasn't done anything really compared to the S&P 500, etc. So there's a much bigger problem. So I feel like it's kind of a dumb idea to try to get a short-term sugar high by a buyback. So the whole thing doesn't really make sense for me, especially right now as they try to expand internationally, which will be highly cash absorbing. So I stop here.
Thanks, AJ. Omar, what do you think about BYD's buyback?
Well, it's a pretty small buyback, right? How much was it? Like a few tens of millions of dollars?
Is it? The article didn't say, but it sounds small.
Yeah, I mean, the Chinese stock market has not been doing well. So they're kind of doing that thing they do where they go, okay, guys, stop selling. Or, it's illegal to sell, that kind of thing. And it's really kind of the Chinese property bubble, the liquidation of Evergrande, all this stuff is kind of just weighing on equities. You have less foreign investment. So I think this is kind of the backdrop of it. You just have a lot of weakness in the Chinese equity market, and they're trying to do something, but I don't think they really have the capacity to do that much of a buyback. So I'm not sure. I didn't verify the information myself, but I saw somebody reply to my tweet and they said it's something like, $50 million or something like that. I don't know.
Thank you. They're selling vehicles for $11,000. That's kind of the more shocking part of the article. It sounds like they're still profitable.
Yeah, some of you guys may have seen my analysis, but I tried to back out the profitability of the vehicles, because BYD lumps everything together in the segment disclosure, which makes zero sense with their huge batteries business. And when you, I think, apply some high level but sensible assumptions, you basically arrive at the conclusion that they have close to zero profitability on their vehicles. And when you look at the net profit and how lucrative actually other large battery makers are, then you see that the auto business is like a complete disaster. And the interesting thing about BYD is they've been talking about spinning off the batteries business for I think 2 years, and supposedly this year it's going to happen. So we would see for the first time in 3 years the underlying auto business then separate, because they would have to restate at least, I think, 2 financial years, and then we would see whether basically that is correct, that they have basically close to zero profitability in the auto business, and that would be kind of a shocking result, I think.
According to an exchange filing in December 2023, BYD recommended a buyback of shares worth 200 million yuan. That's about 27 million USD. The overall goal behind this move is to boost investor confidence and maintain stability in the firm's value. So it's just a marketing stunt.
Omar, what do you think BYD's market cap should be? Or if you don't want to answer, I'll ask AJ too.
Let's see. BYD market cap 71 billion. Sounds about right.
AJ, what do you think?
To be honest with you, I haven't built a valuation model. I largely looked at their historical financials, and I was most interested in their profitability. But if they, the auto business is highly capital intensive, and given their super low profitability, there might be, like, when you do proper valuation, you might actually arrive at the result that the auto business, you would, like, a business like BYD would always do a sum of the parts, and you would split out the batteries, the autos business. You might, if you do it properly, you would probably even you would split the ICE business out from the EV business, assuming that in the next 10, 15 years, the ICE business will end, and ICE, I also mean hybrids. And so you would not apply a perpetuity value to that segment. So I'm not going to go too much into detail, but you would do some of the parts, and there might be, it might actually turn out, if you do the analysis, that the auto business has right now zero value. If you don't produce excess returns above your cost of equity, very simple, because of the high capital intensive nature of the business. And for example, when you look at Toyota, people who follow my post probably saw this. Toyota is basically generating no cash. So for the auto business, if there's no excess cash coming out of the business, then there's basically no long-term capital returns to a year, and therefore the business, you could argue, has zero value in a sense. But BYD's big value, I think, is the batteries business, because they have some apparently very good tech that is on par with Cattle, and Cattle might be the most advanced battery maker right now. With one little caveat, Panasonic seems to have the best track record when it comes to battery reliability, because I think they have had, in over 10 years, zero recalls of the batteries. So that's quite special. And so anyways, I would basically value BYD mostly on the batteries business, I think, and the long-term potential of that.
Okay. So Omar believes BYD's current market cap is about reasonable. AJ says BYD automotive is not very valuable because it depends mostly on ICE and hybrid sales. But BYD's battery business could be valuable. So
could I just add one very big point about Chinese auto market in general?
Okay.
So that everybody knows Chinese auto market is by units by far the largest auto market in the world. But there's another very peculiar feature about that market, and there are, depending on how you count, around 4 to 10 Chinese auto companies that are either directly or indirectly controlled by some form of government. And some form of government, I mean either the central government or some state government. And actually in China, they can have very different agendas. It's quite complicated, but the bottom line is these are state actors, and these state actors, they're not driven by return requirements, earning your cost of equity, etc. And so they have different agendas. They want to further the employment in the state, they require the factories to be in the state, etc. All this kind of industrial policy stuff. So it's not about making really lots of money. It's really making sure social cohesion and employment provision, etc. And all this stuff. So you basically have these very large auto companies in China that capture a big chunk of the market that do not have to earn the cost of equity, and that creates a huge competitive problem. There are other markets like this in other industries. One I'm very familiar with is the one in Germany. The German retail banking market is very similar to this. In Germany, we have about 50% of the market is in the hands of the savings banks, and they are basically government owned. So these savings banks, they also don't need to earn cost of equity, don't have to pay dividends. So they pass this cost saving on to the customer. And that's why these tiny savings banks are highly competitive with the large commercial banks, like Deutsche Bank or some other HVB Bank, etc. So that's why the German retail banking market is horrible. And I think a similar sort of dynamics apply to the Chinese market, where you have these very large state automakers, and they don't need to make money. They can basically pass on these cost savings. They basically can lower the prices effectively, become more competitive. So the end result is you can only compete with these guys and make money if you're highly innovative. And I think there's only very few companies who can actually be so competitive that they can make up for this, let's call it cost of capital disadvantage.
Okay, thanks, AJ. If Meta wants to come up, I want to talk about Nvidia and OpenAI Sora and Gemini 1.5. Switch topics. I think that's enough BYD talk. Thank you, AJ. Meta, how are you?
Good. I was hoping to have more time today, but I only have about 15-20 minutes.
Okay. Which one do you want to talk about? OpenAI Sora, Gemini's 1.5, or Nvidia earnings?
I'll opt not for Nvidia earnings because I didn't follow it.
Okay. Well, clearly you haven't followed because they haven't announced yet.
There you go. I've not been following.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Okay. So OpenAI Sora doesn't have competition, huh? At this time, they're like the only player. Is that right?
Not true. It's a research paper that was announced on the same day that VJEPA was announced by Meta, Facebook. I'm just going to say Facebook because it's confusing. And DeepMind released Lumiere 3 weeks ago, which is pretty much the same thing as Sora, but they're both research papers. One just got more press.
Wow. I mean, okay, so if that's the case, if it's literally a PR issue, OpenAI is killing every single time, right? And Omar says that these models in the longer term are going to look very similar. So is it really going to be just about PR and marketing?
It's about hardware and the way you make your software scalable. That's what's kind of exciting about the Gemini. Well, obviously, I work in this space, so I need to be conscientious. I'm very biased, but I do think the hardware and the software cost reductions, just like in the vehicle space, is what's going to differentiate the competition. Because if you can't get your costs down to the point where you can serve, you can only burn money for so long. And right now, everything else in this world is like at a place where you have to justify money, except there's still this like kind of VC bubble happening for AI where you can raise tons of money, just say you're doing something in AI, and they let you burn money for a long time. But eventually you have to figure out how you're going to make money. And all these systems may not be profitable enough to maintain the cash burn rates if they don't figure that out soon.
Is that why he's raising $7 trillion?
I don't know if that's actually true or not. I think that might be just like a rumor mill, but is he raising it at 7 trillion valuation? Because 7 trillion is a ridiculous number to try and raise.
Omar?
Yeah, I mean, this seemed maybe there's just like some meme value there or something. I think what they said is that they would ultimately need to raise up to 5 to 7 trillion or something like that, like thinking super long term. Not like they're raising a $7 trillion seed round or something like that, although I imagine you would need probably billions, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars to get into making chips in a serious way. So, I don't really know what he's thinking there, but Google definitely has an advantage in having TPUs, that sort of integration there. There's a few different advantages you can have. You can have a compute advantage. You can have a data advantage. You could have something like YouTube, I think would be amazing for training a model like this. You've got videos of pretty much every kind. So, yeah, there's other models that have actually been released. Sora is just kind of a paper at this point. They say they have some people red teaming it. But you have like Stable Video, for example, from Stable Diffusion and other models, their output isn't as good. So it's not necessarily that this is the first text to video model ever. Like, even Tesla has a text to video model they've been using internally for generating some training data. But I think people were more just looking at sort of the quality of this output as really being standout. And, so they're using this diffusion transformer paper from a few months ago. And it was kind of interesting, some of the little details they talked about. So instead of tokens, they have sort of patches, they called it, where, it sort of is like the equivalent of a token, but for the video space. And they sort of compress the video into like this sort of latent space. So there's some interesting stuff there. But again, when can I use it? What's it going to cost me? Those are kind of my key questions right now. And once I can actually get my hands on it, then I can really start to form more of an opinion.
Yeah, the video and the launch to me seems more reactionary, and so it's maybe more polished. But have you seen the Lumiere video or the VJEPA videos? Or anything from Stable Diffusion?
I think I've browsed their website. So, I was impressed with all of them, right? Because I had never seen AI text to video before. So each one was, successively impressive to me. And we're just starting to scratch the surface of what this can do. But, just like LLMs, right? ChatGPT had this big splashy launch, 100 million users or whatever. But ultimately, you've got great models from Google, Gemini doing things that the OpenAI models cannot do, right? If you're trying to build, just a retrieval system for your data or something, having a 1 million token context window or a 10 million token context window compared to like 32K or 64K, it completely eliminates the need to do retrieval augmented generation and all that bullshit and chunking, and it's just a better model, right? So if I'm trying to court an enterprise, that's a big selling point right there. And okay, I'm already using Google Cloud, whatever. I can just sort of call that API. Then you've got the open source models. I can inference that on my own GPU. You got Facebook out here putting out Llama 2. They're going to put out a Llama 3. And that's free to use, even for commercial purposes, even if you want to make money on it. So you can just download that. You can inference that on your own GPU in your own data center, control your costs. You don't have to pay some absurd markup. And that's a great option too. If you just need something kind of simple that a model like that can handle. You got a Mistral out of France, all these open source models. People are just publishing them on Hugging Face, remixing them, doing different variants, medical focus variants, whatever. So it's an incredibly competitive space. They certainly have one of the best brand names in AI, but who's ultimately going to win the customers? It's definitely not set in stone yet.
There's also, I think, the X factor here. Not, like everybody on X is following certain accounts. There's like little bubbles that occur. And I think there's a high overlap between Sam Altman's followers and Elon's followers. But as an example, I think it's telling that Elon gave a just saying congratulations out to Sundar after the announcement of the 1 to
10 million tokens. And importantly, in the paper, they point out they tested it all the way up to 10 million, but the needle in the haystack didn't start to fail. So that it's not like they're saying it scales only to 10 million. It's more of a like, it didn't make sense to keep going beyond this because 10 million tokens, trying to make this a little bit more reasonable to understand, it's equivalent of 0.16% of the entirety of Wikipedia in English. So while it's not like 1%, but you could see like, let's say it went up to 100 million. At that point, it's like, what kind of the questions are you asking that requires 1% of, I would argue Wikipedia is on the order of human knowledge. What kind of questions require 1% of all knowledge to answer the question? Not many things. You can easily segment it into like, okay, this is a biology question, or this is a math question, or what have you, and like really decide what is irrelevant to your current question. And then you can just provide the context, ask your question, and you never need to retrain the model. So it's kind of like what Omar was saying around, you don't have to do the retrieval stuff. You can still do it to improve the model. But, and I posted about this yesterday, I feel like it's now getting to the point of how do we define AGI? Because if we don't come up with a definition, I think we're just going to keep moving the goalpost. And I would argue at some large enough token size window and a model that's high enough quality, especially given that the model can generate prompts that it feeds back into itself. So it could tell you what scripts to go run and what data to go collect using the particular scripts it generates. You go do that, it comes back, you feed it back into itself. And since the token window is not limiting it, it has really good memory. And it starts looking a lot like AGI. Yeah, one of the things that I thought was really interesting about Sora is how they talked about how they use GPT-4 to generate a lot of the labels for the videos. So they had like a few words from humans, and they said, okay, basically, expand on this. And so that was kind of interesting how you can then start to, it's kind of like Tesla, what they did with auto labeling. You kind of jumpstart these models, and then the models can then be used to create training data and accelerate, the progress of the models. So, it's interesting. I think AGI does need a world model. It needs an understanding of the world. So they're trying to figure out how to do that. And I think it's really going to be important. Like a great LLM, like you kind of think about all these different sort of foundation models. So you got sort of a foundation model for language, vision, video, and they all just sort of kind of coalesce. So I could have a conversation with an LLM and talk about physics, and it should have some understanding of, how the world works that it may be gained from watching a ton of videos. Yeah, and I think that's been shown, right? Like, so early on when GPT first, GPT 1, 2, 3, when all these models came out, there were a lot of examples like asking it if somebody's holding a piece of paper and they let go of the paper with their left hand, what happens? And trying to see, like, does it understand what happens? And we're getting to now a point where a lot of these examples are getting solved, and it's difficult to know if it's because those are the examples we came up with at the time and it trained on it, or if it actually has a fundamental understanding of it. So it's getting more and more complex. But like part of the Gemini examples they showed was watching a 1 hour video and then asking it questions about like, somebody walking on the moon, like through via a drawing, and it kind of putting that all together and telling you that it's from this scene in the movie, and it's the first step for mankind, kind of like that whole quote. That's a pretty telling thing. But what's interesting about both of these models is they're very computationally expensive. However, Gemini 1.5, they say that the model is cheaper to train than the previous version. And this is reminiscent of when the Palm 2 paper came out, and it showed that their smallest model, which was 7 billion parameters, outperformed the original Palm model, which was, I don't know, I forget now, like 30 or 60 billion parameters. So it's like the trend line is we're getting smaller models that are outperforming larger models on the order of 6 months to a year ago. So this pace of progress means that it's possible these models eventually get onto laptops, computers, or not super expensive data center APIs.
Yeah, I think they're going to be
everywhere, really. And there'll be smaller versions you can run on your phone, on your laptop. I think the AI inference hardware is going to become kind of standard, the same way GPUs did, or maybe even to a greater extent. It's just incredible how general these models can be and how useful they can be for so many different tasks. So it really is sort of redefining the input method of our computers. You look at like the Vision Pro, and it's kind of useless without this really strong language functionality. When you don't have a keyboard and a mouse, I think an interface like that can work in the future. But these LLMs that can process language and text and video, they're really going to be at the center of making that experience work. So this is a pretty crazy time right now. We're basically seeing, computing as we know it be reinvented. And it's interesting. It does seem like OpenAI and Tesla are on more of a collision course than ever with this sort of video model they've released. Obviously, they're not competitors today. Tesla sells a car. OpenAI sells a API and a $20 a month ChatGPT subscriptions. They're not competing at all today, but you kind of look at the direction both companies are headed, with Tesla with Optimus and robotics and an understanding of the world from video, and OpenAI also trying to build an understanding of the world from video. In their case, they're trying to generate video based on text rather than drive a car. But you can see really some of the similar thinking there between what Ashik talked about in terms of the foundation model for, world model, and what they're sort of looking at here. So I think they're increasingly going to be intersecting with each other and maybe even competing directly in the future. Like I could see OpenAI inevitably maybe working with somebody on a humanoid robot, or maybe making their own humanoid robot or something like that. I mean, it definitely seems like they're kind of pointed in the same direction there. So it kind of makes sense why Elon's been kind of shitting on OpenAI a little bit, giving them a hard time, saying, they were supposed to be open, they're supposed to be a nonprofit, because he's basically ended up creating a company that he's increasingly looking at suspiciously and saying, they're competing with us for talent. They're competing with us in ways where we may be actually trying to sell the same product one day in the not too distant future. That's 100% accurate. If you look at video as input plus a language understanding, that's effectively what Optimus's brain is supposed to have. And now you have 3 to 4 companies competing over it. I would say Anthropic is about to kind of like maybe fall off. Claude hasn't really kept up, but the brain part. They had a good really 5-second Super Bowl ad, though. Yeah, I would argue C3 AI is doing something a little more pragmatic than they are, but it is what it is. There's a whole bunch of practicality here, which is, do you build the hardware and then you get it out there and you collect all that data and you solve it? Or now we're starting to see, okay, synthetic data is actually really good. It turns out you can sit there and you can dream about basketball and playing basketball and visualizing it. And then when you go on the court, you're going to actually outperform someone who only plays basketball on the court. So when you compare these two things, it's kind of like, okay, so synthetic data might not be perfect. In your dream, when you're playing basketball, it might be all like fuzzy and weird, and it's not like you don't have a perfect rendering. But the core things you're paying attention to in your dream is sufficient for what you're trying to learn in that dream. And the tolerance to bad data that transformers have is like a really big shift in, what people who were in the industry for a long time thought was possible, and people that are, now getting acclimated to it. It really is a very big move from how AI required really clean data sets to now it's like, turns out training on synthetic data is not a big deal. So you can actually learn from yourself, and that's kind of what humans do, right? We learn from synthetic data. We run things through in our head, we simulate things, we think about how it's going to go, and then our physics may not be perfectly valid. Like, let's say you're picturing a sword fighting scene. Somebody may not properly think through how objects can't move through objects when they're thinking that through in their head. However, that thought process itself continued over time makes them better somehow. So it's a very strange thing, but I think we need to reassess how big of a moat real world data really is when it comes to large scale AIs. Yeah, I mean, one way to think about it is essentially that the simulator is just getting really good, right? So whereas we had to architect this really complex video game rendering engine, today with generative AI, you can just kind of like, boom, spit out this video that looks dead accurate. Like, you really need to peep pixels to be able to see it. But, so how much does the model sort of capture the strangeness of the real world? I think you could say today for sure it's probably not as good. You probably need a really good real world data set to train a model that captures all the weirdness of the real world in an accurate way. But yeah, I could see that moat continuing to get smaller over time as generative AI just takes off. Yeah, if you have high fidelity simulation or the ability to just render the output that would have come from a simulation, which I would argue is basically high fidelity simulation, then you can really accelerate speed. So now, again, this brings us back to the original point. It's just a hardware thing. If you look at the OpenAI Sora paper, they actually show on one of the pages 3 videos of a dog playing with a lady. And it like blends into the lady and stuff in the first one, and then they 4x the compute and does pretty well, kind of at the level of most text to video was before the paper launch. And then at 16x or computational spend, it's operating at like real world looking like almost too perfect. That's the same complaint, right? Like the snow's not melting on the dog's face. That's the imperfections of the real world are now what we're seeking, not the perfections that would have been hard to render in the past. So what's to say that another 4x, bring that up to 64x, doesn't solve all those issues? There's nothing that we are seeing today on the scaling curve that makes me at least think this is not just a hardware issue. So as we continue to increase hardware, that's really what the battle here is. Who can make the most efficient hardware for transformers, and who can come up with the most effective and resource efficient ways of training and serving these models?
Yeah, exactly. And
I think both sides are important, both the training and the inference. And they've both been very constrained by right now. But it does seem like in the long term, the model architecture is a commodity, right? These things don't tend to stay secret. People are very open about them. The data long term is a commodity. There's a ton of open data, more all the time. Synthetic data is getting better and better. So what does it really come down to? Compute. And everybody's essentially using the same compute. So that's why you've seen kind of no real secret sauce in terms of pretty similar performance across these different models. But if you can have a foundational advantage in compute, let's say you're able to get compute for 50% less or something like that, that could really be a sustained advantage in being able to train a better model. So it really comes down to this compute war. So now it kind of makes sense when you think about Sam Altman raising money for an AI chip startup and throwing around money, numbers like 7 trillion, what that really means. Yeah, for context, the entire Silicon Valley fabrication space is estimated to be about $500 billion. Yeah, so, this is why things like Dojo are really important in Google's TPUs, even if, as Elon says, hey, it may not work out, but it's really worth trying to do. Because if you can pull it off and actually have a sustained advantage in cost of training, then that's really going to be something that's difficult for someone else to replicate. So I think things like that are really important. That's why you're seeing Meta do it. You're seeing Microsoft get into making AI chips. Really, everybody and their mom. I mean, I've never seen a customer base like Nvidia's where they want to so badly dump Nvidia and their 70% margins, but they're just kind of locked in. And there's been a lot of discussion about this. You know, Jim Keller's been like smack talking a little bit on X. He says CUDA is not a moat, it's a swamp. X86 was a swamp too, and we overcame it. So it definitely seems like there's a lot of energy, a lot of talent, a lot of capital being put into, you know, challenging the trillion-dollar elephant in the room, Nvidia. And you know, their lead is only going to be, I think, eroded over time as more attention gets put into this field. But how quickly, I'm not sure. You know, they are great competitors. So we'll have to see what happens. But I do think that we will have a greater variety of chips from different companies over time.
Yeah, I think I agree with this notion that CUDA is a swamp for what it's worth. The other way to look at this is as language models get really good at adapting programming languages from one format to another and really refining how you write the languages, you can no longer claim programming languages as a moat. So CUDA as a moat, I don't buy it for that reason, in addition to many other reasons. And then the other part is when it comes to hardware specialty, the key thing about the hardware specialty is if you go back to like the warehouse analogy we've used in the past, it's like you have like these bouncers with like counters standing in front of each of the rooms, and different amounts of each of the different kinds of rooms is being used. So let's say there's 10 flavors of rooms and people go to different genres of music and they're going in and out. Until you deploy these hardware ASICs into production and you put these bouncers out there to count how much traffic is going to each of these rooms, you don't really have a good sense of how much each of them is, like what the popularity of each of them is. So if the first room is 10 times as popular as the other 9, you want to allocate 10 times as many of those rooms on your hardware. That's how each iterative generation is usually getting better and better, because they can just look at the ratios of popularity and they can reallocate the space on the chips properly. They can even move them closer to each other to like effectively shrink the paths that these music goers in this analogy are going to travel. So the big advantage, in my opinion, is whoever has the hardware lead with the most usage early on will continue to maintain that lead as long as they don't fumble.
All right. Is that it? You guys figured it out? So who's the winner? Who should we invest in?
I'm not going to say who we should invest in or who the winner is, but
After all that,
I will say
there's
this.
no
I'll say
punchline.
very-
This is like a joke
Hold on,
that
I'll say-
goes
I'll say-
on and on and on without a punchline. Machine, what's the
I
punchline? Meta,
don't
you're
think
done.
there
You're
is a
Machine.
winner.
Meta, you've had the stage for half hour. Did not deliver a punchline. So, Machine, what's your punchline?
I don't have a punchline. I just want to know, is Meta finally quit his bet? Is he giving up your bet against me on L4? Why would I have given up? That's such a silly question. We're closer, not further, from the last time you asked.
We're gonna get a question from Tesla Yoda, and then I'm gonna force you guys to a punchline. Yoda, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering if you guys are also looking at TSMC. They make obviously the chip for Nvidia, AMD, the Apple Silicon, etc. Just thoughts from the panel.
I think TSMC is the only company with a moat at this time because they have managed to keep a really good trade secret of how they have 3 to 5 nanometers of precision in their chipset design. And the closest competitor is Intel, and I think they're targeting 5 to 7, and they still don't have that because they actually are closer to 12 to 14 right now. So it's like not even close in terms of competition. If
if folks want to like pressure TSMC, they couldn't. But what's strange is TSMC is keeping their prices pretty low given the moat that they have. So I think there's non-capitalistic reasons why that's happening.
Yeah, I think their margins is around just above 50%, usually 50 to 55 is your margins. And Intel is also their customer, actually, especially at the advanced nodes. So yeah, just wanted to share that.
Meta, Nvidia, buy, hold, or sell?
Me personally, I would sell.
Okay, Omar?
Hold.
Okay. Machine or Yoda, if you guys want to opine, you may, on Nvidia, buy, hold, or sell.
I think it's a hold.
Nvidia would be buy for me because of the impending, I think the split. Although again, TSM has I think a multiple of 25 right now, so it feels like it's more attractive.
Okay, so we have on Nvidia, we have one buy from Yoda, one sell from Meta, and two holds from Omar and Machine. So let's start with Meta. So Yoda said his reason for a buy is impending split. So he's, maybe forecasting a rush into the stock leading into a stock split. Meta, what's your, say 30 second, 60-second, 1-2 sentence summary, executive summary for your why it's a sell?
If we're looking at a 1 year plus horizon, I don't think their margins will sustain. And then based on their current pricing, I don't think the market's expecting that.
Omar, do you think Nvidia's margins will sustain in the next year or two?
Well,
to be honest, I have no clue, but I think they probably will, for the most part, hold up.
And I think Machine thinks so too. He said in earlier spaces that orders and demand for the H100s should sustain for the next year or two. Right, Machine?
yeah, I think so. But even if they don't, I guess where my head is that I think even if margins decrease, the amount that they would decrease would be compensated by the increase in revenue, because they're growing revenue still. That overall operating income would still be flat, if not still going up a bit. And if you look at their valuation on their last quarter, then they're not really that super highly valued if that was just extrapolated out for 4 quarters. That's why I'm hold though, because I'm not sure that the margins are going to sustain and then therefore be a buy. I'm going to wait and see what I read and listen to the next earnings and see where things are then to kind of update my thoughts.
So I've been listening to a lot of talk on Nvidia going into this earnings release this week. It is a hot stock. And I think the market consensus is what Machine just said, which is even if their margins don't sustain, their top line is going to grow, so operating income might grow or stay stable, etc. The question is, does that justify 100 PE? And yes, it's the historical PE, etc. If you annualize last quarter, etc., it might be lower, but still, it's 100 PE.
But it's a lot lower. It's like 40 or under.
Do you think 40 is reasonable for a stagnant operating income?
I don't know. Why don't you ask Tesla if a 60 is reasonable?
Yeah, but Tesla has obviously, as you know, megapacks, factories ramping on 2 continents. We have Optimus project that's going to change labor as we know it. We have robotaxis on the horizon, Cybertruck production ramping. And, only Elon knows what else. What does Nvidia have beyond H100s?
No, I agree. There is a much bigger long-term potential with Tesla over many years in the future. In the nearer term, for the next year or two, those things, even Cybertruck or Megapacks, aren't going to fundamentally change their operating margins in revenue so much where they can really be super highly valued. So it's really going to come down to perceptions of FSD and Optimus changing their valuation. So, I mean, I agree with that. Nvidia has more limited scope, and so it's going to be more sensitive to, the market reaction to margins, current margins on their H100s and whatnot. And if those go down, the stock will suffer more likely than Tesla would when their margins went down.
The stock's got a trailing PE of 95, but the forward PE is 35. And if they keep growing, it's going to continue to look even cheaper. So, I, of course they've got this huge lead. It's probably only going to erode over time. I would be very shocked to see them actually take more share of the market over time. Everybody wants to get away from them. They hate that they're spending, 70% margins for Nvidia on these products. But you look at this business, they're going to sell 2 million of these things in the next year, these DGX H100s. They cost $40,000. So this thing costs almost as much as a Tesla. They're going to sell as many of them as Tesla sells. And instead of the margin being 16%, it's 70%, right? I mean, that's a really great business. Sure, people may be trying to get away, but the big customers are Google Cloud, Amazon AWS, and Microsoft Azure. These are big ships. They don't just change, they don't just cancel their Netflix subscription, cancel their Nvidia because, they got too drunk last night and spent too much money. These are like, budgets that they've set in advance. They got customers. We're depending on them to do this capital outlay. They're going to buy it, right? Any sort of change in the market is going to be at least at a 3 to 5 year time horizon, really. There's a lot of inertia here. And you know what? People are just like, the stock just has momentum. When people just see it shooting up, you know how people get. Things can get a little irrational, right? So whatever a rational investor thinks, it can go a little bit higher than that. Like if you had told me, and I was super bullish about Tesla in 2018, what's the highest you think the market cap could go? I wouldn't have suggested $1 trillion, but it went well over $1 trillion. So, things can get a little bit nutty. People just see everyone else making money. They want to pile in. That's not necessarily the best time to jump in when it's shooting up. You can get burned. Eventually there's going to be a correction, but, would I tell someone to sell it? It's easy to look at it and say, oh my God, it's overvalued, sell it. But people told me that when it was like 200, 300, 400. And I almost listened to them, but I'm glad I didn't because, it's just going up. And when you're riding a rocket ship, don't let go in the market. There will be a moment when it sort of corrects and then maybe I'll, trim my position a little bit. But I'm not sure when that day will be. It could be this week with earnings. It could be next quarter. It could be in 4 quarters. Who knows?
Two good replies in X. So if you want to participate in the discussion, you may either request to speak or you can leave a reply either on X or on YouTube live chat. The link to which is at the top of your screens. YouTube live hours help me get to watch hours requirement. First good reply. I missed the key player in Nvidia. A perfect squirrel says Nvidia has Pelosi. So that's a really good point. And then the second good reply, Blue Skies 123 says, after H100s, Nvidia has HGX H200. Nvidia is introducing a new top-of-the-line chip for AI work, the HGX H200. The new GPU upgrades the wildly in demand H100 with 1.4 times more memory bandwidth and 1.8 times more memory capacity, improving its ability to handle intensive generative AI work. Has anyone ever seen a table that compares NVIDIA's current product, future product, versus what others have said they're going to put out in the next couple of years? I would be interested in that table. If you have, please reply to the space with that table.
I mean, it's weird. It's almost not really about that. Like, you could get an AMD GPU and it can kind of do the same thing. But Nvidia is just sort of the gold standard. They've been doing this for years, right? You saw them donate the first DGX computer to OpenAI back in 2016. They've just been investing in this in a long time, whereas others are now just sort of looking at it and going, oh shit, this is actually a really important market. So, you know, there's a lot of chips out there with pretty similar capabilities, but it's everything. It's the hardware, it's the software, it's the APIs, right? A lot of people, I mean, GPU programming is kind of esoteric. People know how to program a CPU, but programming a GPU, people are kind of like, huh? Like, most people do not know how to write CUDA code. CUDA is like this very sort of esoteric thing. You're mostly just relying on a CUDA module that somebody wrote, right? And your average sort of GPU user, if you're just running some training job in PyTorch or something like that, you probably don't know anything about CUDA or the implementation details of the kernel. You just know that, okay, this is my setup and it works with the NVIDIA GPU. So it's a really interesting situation.
Yoda and the machine.
Yeah, the other reason for a buy for me is Jensen. So he is a master storyteller. He I'm all in on Tesla, of course. So, but that's actually one difference between sort of him and Elon. He may be lesser of an engineer, maybe by far, but from an investor relations perspective and storytelling perspective, he's probably stronger. And so that's definitely not something to underestimate as well.
Thank you. Jensen founded NVIDIA, is that correct?
Yeah, correct. And it should be worth noting that it's about the ecosystem. So Jensen has relationship with the founders, Morris Chan of TSMC, and it is the grip hold on that capacity on TSMC's side, as well as on the material supply side with Japanese raw material suppliers, and then that actually creates the moat. It's not pure just sort of the science or the engineering side. There's a whole supply chain ecosystem, obviously, and so that is very difficult for even the Intels of the world to break. A good case in point is China has a lot of chip design firms that are trying to replicate what TSMC has done, but has failed because they don't have the same relationships with the supply chain. So for those reasons, why again, Nvidia would be very, very difficult to replicate. Have you guys noticed they're all Taiwanese? So Jensen, AMD, the CEO is also Taiwanese. TSMC, of course. So there's definitely an ecosystem there.
Interesting point. Thank you very much, Yoda. That's very valuable. Machine, did you have your hand up earlier? How are you going to follow that?
Yeah, well, I was just going to make the analogy that when you compare NVIDIA's ecosystem to others, it's kind of like imagining that you had two male escorts. One is you, Iman, and the other is me. And you could argue that they both have the same hardware and they could work good enough in your case. But really, the end user still knows that if they go with the superior male escort, me, that everything's going to be taken care of. They can just sit back and relax and know that they will be pleased. And in your case, they would have to be really concerned and make sure, is he going to do it right? Do I have to get involved? How much effort do I have to put in? And so people will pay a premium for the superior experience, in my experience.
You know, I was looking at more audience data over the weekend, specifically looking at demographics of my audience, and I was wondering, why is it so slanted to one side, one gender? And I think you reminded me today why that is.
I apologize to your female listeners. That was all a joke. I have never been a male escort. Yaman, I cannot speak for.
Well, I mean, Yoda made a really good point. Why Nvidia enjoys such a amazing, um, you know, ecosystem in the supply chain. It's not just about the engineering, but supply chain ecosystem. So it would make it even harder for AMD or others to catch up to Nvidia. So then, Yoda, I guess the question, a natural question for you is then why are you 100% invested in Tesla if you're so impressed by Jensen and you believe that the stock is undervalued and they will continue to dominate?
Yeah, I should say that I think I'm about 95% on Tesla in the portfolio. I've been divesting Apple, which was a part of the portfolio, into TSMC, and I was holding Nvidia, but unfortunately that was prior to. I had a position that I sold prior to ChatGPT moment in late 2022, and so for me right now it's about shifting Apple into TSMC and Nvidia. Again, it's just that the Nvidia currently has a higher P ratio post 2022 versus TSM, and so TSM is sort of a more of a hedge bet because every AI chip has to go through them in terms of the advanced node AI chips. But of course, I would love to have held on to more Nvidia.
Machine.
I don't know. He was just talking in circles there, Tesla Yoda. I mean, I don't know. You're making excuses about Apple, selling your Apple. Maybe you'll convert it into Nvidia. I don't know. I understand that. We know the real reason why you're mostly invested in Tesla. It's just because your username is Tesla Yoda and you don't want to change it to Nvidia Yoda because it sounds even more stupid.
Oh my gosh. All right.
That's okay. I'll take that one.
Yoda, what do you expect from Wednesday from Nvidia's earnings?
I think Jensen is going to say that the market is exploded and they cannot see the end of demand. Maybe very similar to what Elon talks about, kind of the next gen vehicle demand that it's essentially unlimited. I think a figure that AMD has been thrown out there is it's about a $400 billion TAM. But for the most part, no single company can address that in the short term because it's supply capacity constraint. So it's really a moot point. It's really for them to share that outlook that basically demand is essentially unlimited in the short term. And he always talks about how essentially the industry is trying to convert to accelerated computing, and so all the data centers are converting to accelerated computing. So it's really supply and manufacturing capacity constraint would be the story, I think.
Gotcha. Thank you. I'm going to pin at the top a post by the AI investor. The AI investor says, Omar, I'm going to ask you about this one. Fun fact, Nvidia is projected to sell 2 million H100s in 2024, close to the number of cars that Tesla would sell in the same year. Nvidia sells H100 for $30,000 to $40,000 with gross profit on each of $21,000 to $28,000. Tesla sells cars for $46,000 with a gross profit of $9,000. The crazy part about Nvidia gross margin, Nvidia doesn't even manufacture the chip. Another crazy part, there's no limit to the demand of H100s while demand for cars is limited. Do you agree with the statement that there's no limit to the demand of training chips?
Well, of course not. There's a limit to everything.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. Yoda, what do you think? Do you think there's a limit to training chips, and that's specifically for H100s? And if there is, like Omar says, and I think so too, how far is that?
Yeah, I think in the short term there's no limit. Again, just more from a capacity of manufacturing perspective. But in terms of the IP, eventually these things do get copied because people move around companies. And again, I don't want to not mention this part, which is TSMC, when they work with their customers, they actually help them with solutioning. And so some of this IP is actually residing with TSMC. And so how they intentionally or unintentionally or through osmosis share that with AMD, and other companies, of course, they don't do that explicitly, but, how those kind of knowledge gets shared eventually, I think is a risk. So the only thing you could trust is that Nvidia, I believe, is one of those companies, much like Tesla, that is always innovating and views that innovation is ultimately, the real moat, not patents, etc. So I do think that Nvidia, as they have with all the various platforms that they've done throughout the last couple of decades, they'll continue to do that under Jensen's leadership.
Omar?
Yeah, so, just some additional thoughts on the Nvidia and Tesla comparison. So it is definitely really striking today. But you think about a situation that could arise in the next couple of years where the average car in the fleet can generate, let's say, $300,000 in gross profit over its lifetime. And that's split, 50-50 between the fleet owner and the Tesla company. The equation could look very different. Whereas when you look at compute, you've never in the history of the microprocessor seen a situation where a chip just stays really expensive. It's always gotten to the point where you get more transistors for less money, you get more performance, and you pay less for it. It always just sort of goes in one direction of this type of compute just being commoditized. So that's kind of what I see. Right now, they've got this huge moat. It's become this hot thing. There's this huge surge of interest. But over time, I think it's going to be just as much of a commodity as an ARM CPU is today. So how they really survive in that environment or what the future looks like, I'm not sure they're going to be able to sell it at the price of a car forever. There is a point where, maybe you have enough compute really, or you say, okay, well, we found ways to use this compute much more efficiently. Now we don't need to scale as quickly, that type of thing. these type of economies like tend to emerge when you have something that you're spending billions of dollars on. People get creative and look at ways to use it more efficiently or ways to not use it or so on and so forth. So I think probably over time I'd rather invest in Tesla's business. They, I think, post autonomy have a car that essentially is 10 times as valuable. It costs them the same to manufacture, but the value they pull in terms of earnings they generate over the car's lifetime is, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 times what it was before or more. And there's no end to it, right? You just get a cut of all the revenue on the fleet. And I think demand there probably scales a lot more sort of smoothly than chip demand, just because you need physical cars out there serving physical demand in the world, and it's a big planet. Whereas, I could see us getting to some point where we don't need, explosive growth in training compute. We have a large amount of training compute already built up and techniques that render it sort of sufficient and not as much of a pressing, urgent shortage situation as it's been recently.
Okay. So you guys are both neutral to bullish on Nvidia in the next year or two. What would change your minds? Hearing what on Wednesday would, or seeing what on Wednesday would change your mind?
Well, if they came out and said, we expect our DGX H100 sales to decline, then that would be a bad sign. But they're not going to say that.
Yoda?
Yeah, I think Nvidia has tried to expand, and I think if they were to go into hardware, I would be on the sell side. So, for example, if they were to all of a sudden announce that they want to build a car, or build bots, that would be a sign, because manufacturing, they don't manufacture their chips. So manufacturing is never, their forte. And so you've got Tesla coming towards AI through the advantage of being the best at manufacturing, cars and bots. Whereas you've got Nvidia coming towards AI from the angle of chip design. And so I think each of them have to be very careful. Like Tesla, going into chip design and manufacturing, as an example, got to be very careful with the Dojo program, that they're not going out of their circle of competence, too quickly, right? Because you could spend obviously billions and billions very quickly, probably trillions if you're open AI. So yeah, that would be the warnings.
It's also interesting that Nvidia invested in other publicly traded companies. On Wednesday, Nvidia disclosed in a regulatory filing that it has stakes in a handful of public companies: ARM, SoundHound AI, Recursion Pharmaceuticals, NanoX Imaging, and Too Simple. Yoda, does that concern you at all that Nvidia is, maybe instead of investing more into R&D or capex or buying back its own stock, it's becoming a holding company sort of?
No, I think Tesla has acquired sort of technology companies that had unique foundational research to offer or to accelerate those research areas. So if Nvidia is kind of strategically picking off these technology companies, then that's fine. Where the red herring is acquiring like a figure.ai or like a complete completely different field that they're going in. But if they're buying foundational research-based companies and getting the IP, that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I should also note that the size of these investments is only a couple $1 million, which is interesting. Why would a $2 trillion company even bother with a $380,000 investment into Nano X? Anyway, well, I'm really interested in this company just because I find it fascinating. As Omar mentions, their gross margins are insanely high. And almost every single customer hates that they're reliant on Nvidia, that everybody's kind of working together to find an alternative to Nvidia. And yet the stock keeps pushing higher, and the retail investors, really chasing the stock. But we'll see. We'll see what that means on Wednesday. Omar said he would change his mind if this management came out and said the demand is declining. But, with 100 PE, even if your growth slows down, it doesn't have to turn down. The stock could go down, right, Omar?
Yeah, of course. But I mean, the thing is, they keep putting out estimates that make the old multiples look cheap by comparison. So you're right. The market does have an expectation for explosive growth. If they deliver even okay growth, right? It doesn't have to be a decline. But even if they said, "Hey, we grew 6%," right? Great growth. But yeah, if they have even, lukewarm growth, that would be a big failure.
On YouTube Live, I concluded the poll for Cybertruck, published the results there. I'm going to start another poll, Nvidia buy, hold, or sell. If you'd like to vote on it, the link is at the top of your screens. Most people participate on X, but keep YouTube Live open and muted just to support the YouTube channel for watch hours requirement for monetization. And I really thank those folks. Machine, go ahead.
I think you just imagine in a year from now what Nvidia's earnings are and kind of what their growth trajectory is, and then imagine what forward PE ratio would be reasonable to apply to them, and just back that up and say what's a fair stock market share price valuation for them. And we obviously don't know that. People will try to model it, but I would argue